Good evening. Welcome to the November 19th City Council meeting. I am Gina Louis-Shara. I'm the council president and I will be presiding this evening. This meeting and all who participate in it with us on Zoom will be audio and video recorded. We're going to begin with public comment as we always do. If you wish to make a public comment, please use the raise hand feature. To raise your hand, you click on the participants bar in the horizontal participants button in the horizontal menu bar at the bottom of the screen. A column will open, and at the bottom of that participant column, there's the raise hand feature. If you're calling in by phone, you can raise your hand by hitting *9. If you're having trouble, you may use the chat feature to send a message to me. I'll do my best to monitor that for people having trouble. It's only purpose that we'll use that function. It'll only be used during public comment. I will unmute each raised hand one by one and ask if you'd like to make a comment. When you begin, please state your name and your city or town of residence for the public record. To ensure everyone has equal opportunity to speak, we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes unless accommodations have been granted. After 3 minutes, I will ask you to please finish your sentence. According to council rules, we do not respond during public comment as it's your time to speak. So while your comments should be directed to us, you'll understand when we don't respond to you. You may speak on any topic. It doesn't need to be an item on the agenda. Due to the size of the meeting and that it's public and how Zoom works, all participants will be muted until called upon. I'll also ask that all but the council please keep your video off until called upon, as comments are directed to the council and only the person who has been recognized has the floor. We'll do our best to act quickly if someone is clearly acting in a way that's inappropriate, deploying profanity or slurs, or displaying something outside of what one would expect in council chambers, and I will remove anyone that needs to be removed from the meeting. If you don't wish to make a comment, you can always watch on Channel 15 or by streaming on Northampton Open Media through their YouTube channel or their other platforms. The recording of this meeting will be available on Northampton Open Media's Government Video Archive channel on YouTube, and we thank them as always for that. And we're always happy to get your comments by email. They're equally part of the public record, so email us at citycouncil@northamptonma.gov. And we will start with public comment. The only hand I see raised right now is Bob Nagle. You can go ahead and unmute.
All right. Good evening. My name is Bob Nagle, a resident of Northampton for 6 decades. Before beginning, thank you to my wife, Melissa, and my son, Christopher, for the love, understanding, and caretaking of a non-compos mentis husband and father. Let me preface my remarks by informing y'all that I suffer from bipolar 1 disorder, a communication disorder that consists of pressured, maundering, and tangential speech and discursive thought. So please bear with me. As you know, bipolar is a disability covered under the American with Disabilities Act of 1990, contingent upon 2 years of psychiatric records and a confirmed diagnosis of bipolar disorder. Salient is a provision requiring non-discrimination in providing state and local services. A conspectus, NPD's misconduct. On June 14, June 16, July 16, 2010, pardon me, Northampton Police Department officer, DIGIAMMO, hereinafter referred to as MPD officer, intruded into my life, inquiring into trivial delusive assertions. The officer, throughout all 3 occurrences, indicated me as a malefactor. He presented an impertinent, choleric, truculent demeanor, holding animus, laced with invectives and asperity, a sententious tirade. I was indignant at his improper, unconscionable behavior. Pardon me. Consequently, on July 30th, 2010, I wrote a letter to Chief Sinkowitz, summarizing NPD officers' impropriety and maladroit comportment. An internal investigation ensued. As a result, I was questioned by Sergeant Powers at my former home at 3 Madison Avenue, Northampton. Sergeant Powers' insouciance was plain to see. He was supercilious, apathetic, and laconic during his casual perusal of my complaint. August 9, 2010, the result of the internal investigation was not sustained, with Captain Savino drawing conclusion within 10 days. September 16, 2011, NPD apprised of bipolar infirmity in NPD report 11-2551. February 28, 2018, front page of the Daily Hampshire Gazette. Chief Casper proclaimed NPD's association and certification in the One Mind campaign. Casper stated NPD is completing a pledge to improve response to those suffering from mental illness in our community. All staff have been certified in the One Mind program. May 30th, 2018. NPD officer responded to spurious canards, detailed NPD report 18120. NPD officer had the temerity to revert to his bumptious names of 2010. This was my last interaction with the officer. Unfortunately, he addressed me from the middle of Madison Avenue with a snarky stentorian proclamation declaring, all PD knows you're a really smart guy. A polemic vituperation, stigmatizing and embarrassing, having a detrimental impact upon my psyche. This entire interaction was captured on cell phone video, refuting the duplicitous, erroneous nature of report 18120. May 31st, 2018, I wrote another letter, this time to Chief Casper, encapsulating the NPD's discourteous, imprudent, injudicious deportment on May 30th, 2018. 800 days, no response from Casper. March 3rd, 2019, my wife, Melissa, yet again penned another letter concerning Casper. 500 days, no response. My conclusion with certitude, Casper was and is biased towards me regarding my mental health soundness. Casper did not attempt to obviate, was obsequious to a neighbor, extending preferential treatment and sophistry. Casper's incredulity in relation to me is plain to see. In my possession are emails between Chief Casper and said neighbor that took place over a period of 9 months. The emails are discreditable, aspersing my mother and father and other family members. Censorious perfidy. Casper's response to my neighbor's emails was swift, and if she was at all dilatory, she vehemently apologized. At no point did the top law enforcement officer for the city of Northampton afford me to write the confute purported avertments, a dereliction of duty. Perturbation and persecution culminated with me moving on from Northampton. Presently, my paramount concern is young adults suffering from bipolar in Northampton. If I may, an anecdote. A friend of my son, who referred to as John, regrettably suffered the mutual misfortune of encountering intransigent, incognizant, unheeding NPD. What was John doing? Walking off his psychomotor, brisk walking, mumbling, contorted face, crazed eyes, bewildered, overanalyzing, experiencing family outcasting, addled, marrying a crisis intervention. NPD was dispatched along with their proclivity of assumptions. NPD's contemptible method of responding to a call when a mental health issue begins. NPD intends to infuriate and name questions, and then expedite fallacious allegations. NPD is a serve of options, trespassing, disorderly conduct, etc. NPD is indefatigable in trifling inconsequential matters with an accusatory, what's going on, along with disparaging slights, riling John and leaving John's mind in a ruinous state. NPD is indolent, inept, and incapable of extending one mind protection to a citizen in the midst of a mental health crisis. To John, you have the right to walk the sidewalks without being provoked by the MPD. A Terry stop requires reasonable suspicion of involvement in criminal activity. Walking is not a crime, and the sidewalks are the domain of the populace.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nagle. That is
I'm not done. I'm still going.
So that was the time limit with the extra accommodations?
I have a disability, question speech. I was granted extra time pursuant to the ADA, American with Disabilities Act. Are you telling me you're not accommodating me because of my disability?
No, the accommodation was for double time. I'm just telling you that.
It was not. It was a time as long as I took to complete my statement. I find that deplorable. I find that unconstitutional. I have rights. I have civil rights under the ADA, and you're violating these. This is a public meeting.
Mr. Nagle, you may continue, but the accommodation that I was told was for double time.
Unfortunately, I was told by your ADA, whatever he is, advisor, who's the only one who's cognizant of the law, apparently, in that city, that I had as much time as I needed. And you're interrupting me. That's extremely, extremely impertinent. Now, may I continue?
You may, sir.
Wow. Jesus. John, the One Mind Police are truly single-minded in their quest to infringe upon your civil rights. Inevitably, John turned to ServiceNet for help. ServiceNet is partners with the NPD in the One Mind program. John was placed on a wait list with dozens of others, confronted with no other options. I'm baffled by such an imprudent approach to mental health care. How about augmenting staff, reducing funding way funds, and reduction in exorbitant edifices? ServiceNet headquarters are now prominently perched on the top of Hospital Hill, providing superb vistas of the valley, a perfect place to have a bird's eye view of John in the nadir of his existence. On a snowy night, treading radically, pining his pitfalls, confined to a Rolodex of thought, hope is nowhere to be found. John makes an effort to rest his head on the piercing cold ground, Paradise City, and apparently unaware of ADA rights. Maybe you should assimilate to those.
Thank you so much, Mr. Nagle. If you send me your email, I'll be happy to forward you the email that says where I was told that you'd ask for an additional 3 minutes.
I asked for additional time. I want to tell you what the email said. And if you can contradict me, let me tell you exactly what it said. It said that I would be granted enough time as my statement needed because of my disability. My disability is pressured speech. You exasperated that. Well, hold a minute there, Council President. You exasperated that by intervening in my statement. I'm a member of the public. This is public forum right now. That's unconstitutional. It's unbelievable. This is how you conduct a public meeting in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts? It's absurd. I have a disability covered on the American Disabilities Act. Please orientate yourself with that, along with your city police department and your MPD chief, who don't know the Constitution or civil rights. And apparently neither does this city council. It is deplorable, unbelievable. I'm trying to give voice to people that don't have voices. Kids that are walking those streets with mental health issues that are treated like horribly by your police department and your chief of police. Unbelievable. It's a plutocracy. You do not care about the citizens. Self-perpetrating, you're all it is. Nothing else to say.
Next up is David Short.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Hi, yeah, my name is David Short and I'm actually a resident of Montague. I've owned industrially zoned property in Northampton since about 1980. I operated Amherst Woodworking in the industrial park until 2013, and since then leasing the building to Royal Talons. I want to express my appreciation for the council's support of the business community through the maintenance of the single tax rate. It has kept Northampton's industrial base strong and growing, providing the kind of living wage job the council cares so much about, while cities with split rates have struggled to attract business. Given the current conditions, maintenance of the single tax rate would be crucial to the survival of downtown businesses. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm gonna go to Hildegard. Are you on?
Yes, but I don't have a comment.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for joining us anyway.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm just gonna go ahead and mute you, okay? Unless you have a comment you want to make.
Yes, that's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay, thanks. Noah Casas.
Great, thank you very much. Yeah, my name is Noah. I think I know all the council at this point. I am the chair of the Northampton Youth Commission. I'm also here with, I think, 6 or so other members of the Youth Commission. We're not all going to speak because we would say the same thing, but we're all happy to be here. And mainly, we're just coming to thank the council for its consideration of the plastic reduction and sustainability ordinance, which we've been sponsoring, and just to express our enthusiasm that it's going to be moving forward in the process towards legislative matters. Just that mention for a second that we have been working really closely with Councillor Nash, as well as Amy Kaelin of the Downtown Northampton Association. And just this last weekend, thanks to the group of the rest of folks here, sent out letters with a copy of the ordinance to every member of the Northampton food establishment community. So just that we're excited to be moving forward, and as always, thankful for the council's time and consideration of the measure, and excited to be working with the business community. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, those are all the hands that I see raised. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Give everyone a minute in case you just decided. Okay, I don't see anybody, and there's no one in the chat. So we're going to close public comment for this evening. And Laura, will you please take the role of the council?
Dwight.
I don't think we heard you, Councillor Dwight.
He's muted.
Wait, how about this? Here.
Okay. Councillor Foster.
Here.
Councillor Jarrett.
Here.
Councillor Labarge.
Here.
Councillor Maori.
Here.
Councillor Nash.
Here.
Councillor Quinlan.
Here.
Councillor Shara.
Here.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Okay, our first thing on our agenda is the tax classification hearing. The Northampton City Council will hold a public hearing on Thursday, November 19th, 2020 at 7:05 p.m. via remote participation to discuss the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of real and personal property within the City of Northampton for FY 2021 in accordance with Chapter 40, Section 56 of the Massachusetts General Laws. The City Council will hear all persons who wish to be heard thereon. And so this is a hearing that we do annually, and I would talk more about it, but there's going to be a very thorough presentation by Mark Dotrell, the principal assessor, and by Susan Wright. So I will let them explain, particularly to the new counselors who are doing this for the first time. But let's go on and open this hearing.
Move to open the hearing, please.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councillor Dwight, seconded by Councillor Thorpe to open the public hearing. Roll call on opening, please.
Councillor Dwight.
Yes.
Councillor Foster.
Yes.
Councillor Jarrett.
Yes.
Councillor Labarge.
Yes.
Councillor Maori.
Yes.
Councillor Nash.
Yes.
Councillor Quinlan.
Yes.
Councillor Shara.
Yes.
And Councillor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, the hearing is opened, and hi Susan, hi Mark, welcome.
Hello.
I know we have a PowerPoint from you as well, but I don't know if you want to start before or have anything to say before we bring up the PowerPoint.
I think we can have Laura bring up the PowerPoint, and I'm just going to start and then turn it over to Mark. This is the, well, at first I want to say this is the first time in a long time we haven't had Joan Seraphin, our longtime assessor, here with us doing the tax classification hearing. And I just want to again shout out to Joan and her 47.5 years of service to the city as our principal assessor. Tonight, this is the final step in the FY21 budget process. I know it feels like we do
wrong screen on.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, one second.
I've always wondered what your notes look like.
I know.
Oh dear. Okay.
So sorry, Susan.
Oh, no, that's okay. So this is the final step in the FY21 budget process. The budget process, oh, did it go away?
It's coming back. Here we go. Is that the right one?
Yeah.
The
There we go.
budget process is something that is, starts in the spring, and technically it doesn't end until we have this tax classification hearing, and then we submit what is called the recap to the Department of Revenue. And the City Council tonight, you have a very important role in the budget process by choosing the tax classification factor. The recap, which is what ultimately happens after this hearing, the recap is a document that we submit to the Department of Revenue. And basically on the recap sheet, we have to prove that we have balanced the city budget. And so the recap goes in, it has all of the votes of City Council, it shows how much money we had, when we made those votes. And basically the DOR will review it, and then they will approve our tax rate. After the hearing tonight, we're respectfully requesting that you do 2 readings on this factor tonight. Because we have to submit the recap, I'd like to submit it tomorrow. And what happens after that is the Department of Revenue reviews the recap, then they approve it. Then we have to have the tax rate loaded into Munis, the tax bills printed, and then they need to be mailed. And all of this has to happen by December 31st in order for the tax bill, the 3rd quarter tax bill, to go out and be due on February 1st. And the DOR is also approving tax rates across the state. In general, the tax rate setting process this year was delayed, and mostly in part due to COVID and the fact that we still don't have a final state budget. So unlike other years, we've actually balanced this budget using the governor's budget rather than the final state budget. And so because so many communities are going to be trying to get their tax rates set, we do want to get ours in. So we will respectfully request that you consider doing 2 readings tonight. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our new assessor, Mark, who's prepared this PowerPoint for you to kind of summarize the recap process and hopefully make it more understandable, particularly for the newer members.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Susan. Laura, do you want me to just say next slide whenever?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the Classification Act passed 1978 requires municipalities to classify real and personal property into one of 4 classes according to its use, and that's residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property. Municipalities that are certified by the Department of Revenue as assessing property at its full and fair cash value may elect to shift the tax burden among the major property classes within certain limits established by law. And that's shift the burden. You never get rid of any of that burden. Can you please go to the next slide? So here we have residential, which is by far the largest class we have. That includes all property containing 1 or more units used as human habitation. So that's single family homes, duplexes, condos, triplexes, apartments, as well as the land that those properties are located on and their accessory buildings, such as swimming pools, tennis courts, garages, sheds. The commercial class, that's all property that's used for conducting business. So retail stores, hotels, banks, grocery stores. The industrial class includes all manufacturing facilities, electric companies, solar fields, telephone towers. And the personal property class includes all property used essentially for business or the helping of anything that helps to run your business, such as the equipment in that business, the office machinery, the inventory, the furniture, the fixtures, but by far and away the largest income from personal property for the city is the public utilities, such as the gas companies and electric companies. And on slide 4, the next one, this is, I believe you mentioned this earlier. So this is the Massachusetts general law that gives you, the city council, the authority to determine the residential factor. So the city council, along with the mayor, shall annually first determine the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class of property. The city council, along with mayoral approval, shall first adopt a residential factor. If the mayor vetoes the council's, what the council votes for, they have the right to override that veto with a 2/3 vote of its members. The residential factor that you choose will be used by my office, the assessor's office, to determine the percentages of the local tax levy to be borne by each class for real and personal property. Prior to the adoption of such percentages, the city council shall conduct a public hearing, which we're doing right now. And such hearing, the assessor shall provide all needed data and the fiscal effect of available alternatives, which I hope to do at this point in time. Thank you. So here you see that over the last 10 years, we've maintained a very steady rise in values. Now this aids us a lot in keeping a stable property tax rate. And also you notice that in red, you see the residential levy, which again is far and away the largest income earner for the city. So that's about 80% of the levy. The commercial, industrial, and personal property combined form approximately 20%. And that 80-20% split, you'll see later on, is very important to how we figure out the tax rate and why we've gone with a single rate in the past. Next, please. New growth. And the new growth, it's very important. It helps us grow our tax base. It helps us grow the levy, and it helps stabilize the income needed for the city. It provides flexibility for the budget, both currently and in the future. New growth includes all construction of residential properties, construction of new commercial properties, as well as additions to all property that's already there. So new bathroom, new bedroom. If you finish a basement, if you do a whole renovation of a home, that's new growth. Something that's not new growth, say I revalue a home because the market value has gone up, that's not counted in new growth when we do revaluations just based on sales or anything like that. And my office, the assessor's office, we get our new growth from July 1 to July 1 of each fiscal year. Next slide, please. And last year, we gained nearly $62 million in new growth value, 34.5 from residential, 27.5 from commercial, which translates to a total of $1,039,583 in taxable valuation. And if you notice on this slide, and you'll notice it when we go to slide 8 as well, ever since fiscal 2015, we've maintained very steady new growth. Could you go to the next slide, please, Laura? And see here, fiscal 15, we've maintained a steady tax revenue from new growth of at least $900,000. The last 2 years, we gained over $1 million, which was very good. Next slide, please. And new growth values of our neighboring communities. Northampton leads the region. Well, we led last year by quite a substantial margin. In FY21, only about half our neighboring communities have turned their values in, but we're, at least so far, we're still #1 in the region, and I really believe we're probably going to stay that way this year. And here are some examples of some of the larger projects that have gone on this past fiscal year. We've had very steady construction work and a lot of robust building programs, which have certainly exceeded my own expectations for this year, considering COVID-19 and the economic downturn in a lot of the country. But we've maintained some very good programs. We added 34 new single-family homes last year. In the Village Hill co-housing complex, there were 18 new condos and 7 or 8 more coming in FY22. There was $4.5 million added from a large solar field off Burt's Pit. 46 Round Hill Road and 35 Village Hill Road are some mixed-use buildings that were added. They have office buildings and residential apartments. There's some nice new condos near downtown at 76 Gothic and 5 Pomeroy Terrace. And we even had a large 31-unit affordable housing complex built at 82 Bridge Street. Next, please. And here you'll see the distribution of property by class. Was there a question from anyone? No. Okay. Here you see a distribution of property by classification, residential to commercial. So 80% 80% residential in blue, 20% commercial. The property distribution is important to how we decide to figure our tax rate. That's why Northampton has never gone with the split rate in the past. And this only shows 10 years, but if Joan Seraphin was still here, she could tell you that 80-20% split goes back quite a bit further. And if you go to the 12th slide, this is the same 80-20 split, but with a monetary value. Again, very heavy residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property combining and filling out the rest. At this moment in time, I'd like to turn things back over to Susan Wright. She'll speak about the levy limit.
Okay. All right, next slide, Laura. So this hearing is also about what the levy limit is for the city of Northampton. The levy limit is the total allowable amount that we can charge the taxpayers via the tax rate. And I just want to walk through how the levy limit is calculated, because while our levy limit for 2021 is $67,364,033, the actual levy for FY21 will be $64,854,759.61. What this means is that we are leaving unused levy capacity of 2.5 million and some change. In fact, 2,509,273.39. And that goes back to the mayor's decision in April. If you recall, the override that was passed in March, just before the COVID crisis, the mayor then in April decided to delay the implementation of the override, delaying using that excess capacity generated by the override for a year to give our taxpayers tax relief. So I want to walk you through this, but know that we are leaving excess levy capacity equivalent to the override that was passed in March. So how the levy limit is calculated, you actually have to go back a year. So if I start at the top of this chart, I think it'll be the easiest to see. So the levy limit for 2019 was $59,108,954. You then take 2.5%, which is the allowable limit under Prop 2.5. So 2.5% last year was $1,477,724. And then you add the new growth that Mark just talked about, which last year was $1,063,084. And you come up with a total of $61,649,762. So that was the levy limit last year. So that becomes the base for FY21. So now we're at the middle section to calculate the FY 2020, the FY 2021 levy limit. We start with the levy limit from the prior year. So you can see that number just carries forward, the 61,649,762. Then we take 2.5%, which is 1,541,244. Then we add the new growth that Mark just talked about, which was 1,039,583. And then because the override was passed, we add another 2.5 million. So our new levy limit becomes 66,730,590. Then you add the debt exclusions. If you recall, we've had a number of projects that were debt excluded over the years. Most recently, JFK Middle School, which was completed and no longer on the tax rate a couple of years ago. 2020, we finished paying for the renovation of the Northampton High School. So right now, the only debt excluded project that the city is currently assessing taxpayers for is the police station. So the debt for 2021 is 633,443. So that gets added to the levy limit. So the total levy limit for 2021 is 67,364,033. Now, there's one other line on this that I didn't talk about. And if you look at section 2, number F, that's the levy ceiling. The levy ceiling is a different number. The levy ceiling is taking the full and fair cash value of all the taxable property in Northampton. And if the tax rate were $25 per thousand, then the tax that we would collect would be the levy ceiling. So the levy ceiling is the maximum we can go to. The levy limit is where we are in our progression towards the ceiling. Because as you know, under Prop 2.5, we can only go up 2.5%. We can only go up with our new growth, and we can make progress towards that ceiling by passing overrides. So the difference between the levy ceiling and the levy limit is the capacity that we would have for future growth. And if we get to the levy ceiling, that's when the tax rate is $25 per thousand.
Nice.
So if that's how the levy limit works. But again, I want to reiterate that while our levy limit for 2021 is going to be 67,364,033, our actual levy will be 2,509,273 less. So we are leaving that capacity that the override gave us, and we are holding that until next year's budget when we will most likely need to pick up some of that new revenue. And if you can just turn to the next slide, Laura. So tonight, what you're doing is you're going to make a decision about whether the city will maintain a single tax rate or whether you will split the tax rate. This is the whole purpose of this hearing. So I do want to make it clear, whether you go with a single tax rate or a split tax rate, the total amount that can be raised in taxes stays the same. In other words, shifting the burden, you're not changing the total that we can collect from our taxpayers across the city. You're just changing who would pay for that. So if you choose a factor of 1, that means you are maintaining a single tax rate, and that all 4 classes of the property, residential, commercial, industrial, and personal property, all those taxpayers with property in those classifications will have the same tax rate. This is what Northampton has done for years. This is the recommendation of the mayor and the principal assessor. However, the city council does have the option to choose a factor less than 1. If you choose a factor less than 1, this shifts the tax burden among the classes. It reduces the share of the tax levy paid by the residential property owners, and increases the taxes on our commercial, industrial, and personal property payers. So that if you choose a factor less than 1, that's the impact. The converse impact is you can choose a factor greater than 1. Not too many towns do this, but if you choose a factor greater than 1, the residential taxpayers would share a greater share of the burden, and the burden would be reduced on commercial, industrial, and personal property taxpayers. So the purpose of this hearing, you're not really setting the tax rate. What you're doing is you're deciding how the levy limit will be distributed across the taxpayers. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mark to finish it up and give you some examples, and then we can begin to take any questions.
Oh, sorry, Mark. Do you see it? There you go.
Can you hear me now? All right, thanks. Okay, so if y'all decide to go with a factor of 1, this will result in an estimated FY21 tax rate of $17.37 per $1,000 of assessed value for all property classifications throughout the city. That's an increase of 57 cents total per thousand compared to FY20. In fact, FY19, the tax rate was $17.37 as well. So we'll just go back to the FY19 rate. Below on the left, you'll see examples of residential tax rates from our neighboring communities. And on the right, you'll see examples of commercial tax rates from our neighboring communities. About half the communities in the area have a split rate and half have a single tax rate. Cities such as Holyoke, Chicopee, Westfield, and West Springfield have split rates. This is primarily because they either currently have or historically had a lot of industrial and manufacturing facilities. And one aspect as to why they may not have gone back to the single rate or gone to a single rate is once you decide to split the rate, it's very hard to go back, as you're raising residences' taxes at that point. Let's see. Could you go to the next one, please, Laura? Now, if we split the rate and go with the minimum residential factor, currently this year would be 88.0364, and the maximum allowable shift allowed by the Department of Revenue. That would drop the average residential tax bill by $695. On the other hand, this would also raise the average commercial bill by nearly $5,300 and increase the average industrial bill by almost $6,350. The split rate for residential would be $15.29 per thousand, and the commercial, industrial, and personal property rate would be $26.05 per thousand. I do, in my opinion, this would put an undue burden on small business owners that are already being hit very hard by COVID-19. And again, our 80-20 split is also not very conducive to a split tax rate. Could you go to the next one, please, Laura? So over 2/3 of the communities in the state of Massachusetts are single rate towns. It is by far and away the preferred methodology of taxing folks. Most split rate cities have a distinctly higher percentage of commercial properties. They average a 70-30 split compared to our 80-20. And those businesses usually are larger businesses such as industrial sites, power plants, and large shopping malls that are hard to move out of the towns. Now, I know Susan mentioned there are a few communities with higher residential tax rates compared to commercial rates. Those are vacation destinations such as P-Town, Truro, Wellfleet, Barnstable, places that have large amount of seasonal rental properties. Next one, please, Laura. And these are some options. These are exemptions, the residential exemption and the small commercial exemption. These are only allowed by mayoral option. I don't know if Mayor Narkowitz wanted to say anything at this time. If not, I could just go on about this. I don't know if Mayor Narkowitz is there or not.
Yes, hold on, I'm just,
I'm not recommending it.
Wait, what?
That's the end of my statement.
Wait, what? Okay. All right. So
These are ones that really don't fit well with Northampton. They sound good on the face of it, but they don't really fit with Northampton, particularly a lot of our smaller businesses that wouldn't, in many cases, wouldn't qualify, particularly our downtown businesses, because of the structure of how they either own rent or own condos or in other buildings. So it's something that's been looked at and studied, and it's nothing that that has ever made sense for Northampton. So it's not something I'm recommending.
And I also would not recommend it either. Even if I had the option to recommend it, I would not. It looks great on paper, but it shifts the burden. So the residential exemption, it would raise the residential tax rate, and while moderately priced homes would get a break, it's not necessarily folks that are struggling. It's not, so it would be the home, you don't know what their income is like. That has no basis on this. And it would shift the burden to higher valued properties, but a lot of our higher valued properties are rental properties. So that could adversely affect low income renters in this situation. And for the small commercial exemption, adopting this would increase the commercial industrial tax rate, and only business owners that also own their property would receive any break. And by far and away, most of our small business owners do not own the property where their businesses are located. So places such as Thorns or Cooper's Corner, which have high overall values, but lots of small businesses, they could see an adverse effect if this was accepted. So that's all I have to say on these. Next one, please, Laura. So this is the final page on the PowerPoint. Both myself and the mayor recommend voting a residential factor of 1. That would result in a single tax rate for all classes, and a $17.37 per $1,000 valuation. And that's, again, like I've said before, due to our 80-20 property classification split, and the burden it would place on small businesses if we were to split the tax rate. And that's all I have for you. Thank you for listening to me.
thank you so much, both of you. That was, I hope, very helpful to everyone. But now's time for questions or comments. Councilor Labarge.
Yes. Looking at the single versus split tax rate, on the bottom here, it says it can be difficult, which I think is very important, for a community to revert back to a single tax rate after splitting the tax rate, as it often results in a substantial tax increase for residential properties. And I think that language is very important here. But I just want to say that at 57, I think we're increasing by $17.37. And I'm not having a problem with it. I feel that I could not go ahead and do a split because of the businesses, of what's occurring with the economy and what is happening here in our own city of Northampton. I mean, our businesses, no matter if it's commercial or small business or not, they're all having a hard time. So I am going to support the factor one because I feel this is the right way to go. And Susan, maybe you could answer that question because I have, to me, I find it to be very serious here of what I just read on that by splitting that tax rate.
Well, once you split the tax rate and shift the burden to commercial, industrial, and residential, the only thing you can do to start bringing it back to a single tax rate, raising taxes, raising the share that the residential side. So it's going to, if you shift it and you want to go back, you're going to have to raise taxes on your residents. I mean, Holyoke is a perfect example. They split the tax rate long time ago. And it's going to be very hard to raise taxes on residential to try to get, if they ever wanted to try to get back to a single tax rate. And I don't think we should underestimate the fact that because we have a single tax rate, Northampton is attractive to new businesses and commercial enterprises because they will pay lower taxes than they would pay in some of our surrounding towns. And I think that's evident by the amount of new growth and new construction. The fact that we had over $60 million worth of new growth for 2 years in a row. And the next nearest town, I think, was, I'd have to look, it was Agawam with 44 million. I mean, we're a third higher than the next highest town in terms of growth. And I think that's a really key thing to keep in mind, is that Northampton is attractive and the single tax rate is one of the reasons that businesses do choose to locate here.
So
I'd also like to point out that there was a caller before we started that lived in Montague that has industrial property here in Northampton, called to specifically thank us for the single tax rate.
thank you.
Okay, so I see a bunch of counselors, and then I'm also mindful that this is a public hearing. So let's let counselors, we're gonna ask questions to the presentation and then we'll go to the public. I want to let any public who's here know that that's, let's just get some of these questions because maybe that will help everyone understand this process. So I saw Counselor Dwight, I also saw Counselor Quinlan, I see Counselor Thorpe. So in that order, Counselor Dwight.
Actually, with actually a very appropriate comment about the fact that it's a hearing, I will refrain and defer to anyone else who wants to ask questions. I mean, I was just going to share some of my personal wisdom, but I think everyone can do without it for now.
I believe you'll get 2 more bites at that apple on the
I'm
agenda.
sure I will. Yeah.
Counselor, I think it was Counselor Quinlan, then Counselor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious what the bills that were sent for quarters 1 and 2 were assessed at. What was the rate on those bills? Because if we approve this the way it sounds now at 1737, but those bills were sent at a lower rate, the new bills will be higher. So just in terms of talking to people, I want to make sure we understand what their bills may look like.
Right. The first and second quarter bills are always at the prior year's tax rate. So last year's tax rate was 1680. So quarters 1 and quarters 2 are called estimated bills, and quarters 3 and 4 are actuals. So unfortunately, once we set the tax rate, the total increase will be divided between those two remaining bills. If we were to set the tax rate earlier, in other words, if we were to get the tax rate set in September, then the second, third, and fourth could be actual bills and be billed at the new tax rate, and that would be good. But generally, it's very difficult to set the tax rate until you've closed your books. We don't close our books until September. So it's pretty much what most communities do.
Right. So just to be clear, I mean, so at 1680 with a 57-cent increase, but not assessed for half the year. So the second half of the year will look like a $1.14 increase. Just want to make sure I understand the math correctly.
Right. The entire annual increase will be loaded onto that third and fourth quarter bill.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mayor Narcoitz, did you want to add something?
And I just wanted to emphasize that that's the other reason why we want the 2 readings, because if we don't and we can't mail the January bill, then it'll all have to be on the fourth quarter bill. Correct, Susan? Because we'll need to do estimated for the third quarter. And so it's always a bummer when you don't get the tax rate set by the end of December. If you're, and there are communities that get into trouble because of town meeting and other issues. And it's a bummer because then people get this super big bill for the fourth quarter. So that's why we always try to get it passed by the end of the year. But this year, because the governor's revised budget was delayed, everybody's all going to be submitting their tax rate, their recap sheets at the same time. So we want to make sure we don't get caught past December, as the finance director said.
Definitely don't want to be a bummer. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. And thank you, Mark, Susan, and Mayor, for being here this evening, and anyone that could step in to answer one of my questions here. Just so I can get the math right, when you came to the actual levy for FY 2021, $64,854,759.61. You got to that amount by taking the total valuation, correct, of the $3,733,722,488, and you divided that by 1,000, and then you multiplied that by the single tax rate of $17.37, correct?
I believe so. That sounds correct. The way I do it is I take the total value, and the total value, hold on, is, hold on, I gotta get that because we have the recap all done. I don't know what I've done with my form, so hold on just a second. Here it is. Okay, so it is, the total value is $3,733,722,488. That's all the value across the city. And then when you divide that by the tax rate of $17.37, that's when you come up with the $64,854,759.
Right, you divided that by 1,000, and then you multiplied it by.
Right, yeah, the 1,000, yeah.
Thank you. And the override amount it's 2.5 million. And is the override going to be deferred until 2022? Is that what I'm seeing here?
Yes, every year we have excess levy capacity. It's and the reason that it's an odd number, it's 2,509,273, is because of the penny and the tax rate. So because you can't overcharge, so you have to sometimes go slightly, just a little bit under. But yes, we're not technically deferring the override because the override is actually voted and we are expending the funds, but we are leaving excess levy capacity equivalent to the override until next year.
Okay. So in doing that, is this going to make a difference in the city's bond rating?
No, it won't. And in fact, we just did that borrowing and our bond rating was reaffirmed. And the fact that we are able to balance our budget for 2021 under the circumstances of COVID, and not have to tap into that excess levy capacity actually puts us in very good position. Okay. Because we had the reserves to fill the hole this year. So this puts us in very good position and would not impact our bond rating at all.
Okay. And when I looked at the Bureau of Local Assessments, it appears DOR, maybe I want to see how they had it listed for us. It appears that they approved the full and fair value for what we can tax. Is that accurate to say?
Yes, they have approved, they've already approved our values. Before we even get to this point, Mark, the assessors have to do multiple steps and get certified for their new growth and their values. And all of that has to happen before we can have this hearing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Maori.
Yes, I wanted to go back to something you said earlier because I want to make sure I understand it. So if we're basing this on the governor's budget, and that's unusual to do so, that the budget hasn't been set. How could that play out if there's a variance at the state level?
Well, if you remember the pie chart of our revenues from the budget book,
yeah,
state revenues are not a huge part of our budget. So that is, in this case, a blessing. The final budget, by the time we do the recap and set the tax rate, the final budget has already been done. There's been the governor's budget, there's been the House budget, the Senate budget, and then there's been the conference committee, and we have the final cherry sheets. This is the first time in my career that we've ever set a tax rate without the final state budget. That being said, if you look at our numbers on DOR, the governor's budget, the House budget, and the Senate budget are all very similar. And the governor's budget is actually when there's a little bit of a variance, the governor's budget is actually the lowest. So the only thing that could happen is we would get more revenue from the state. So we have basically, by using the governor's budget, which is what the DOR told all towns and cities to do, we are using kind of the worst case scenario. So it can only get better.
Thank you. That sounds like a cautious approach. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. I'm not seeing other hands from councilors. I know David Short, I believe you had your hand up before. So now, is there people from the public who'd like to speak or ask a question? Maybe the question's already been answered. Who else? It's a public hearing. Oh, Paul Waterman, sorry. Paul Waterman, I don't see you anymore.
I think we lost.
Oh dear. Okay, well, hopefully Paul can jump back in. Anybody else with questions or comments?
You also have former Councilor Murphy present.
I do. He's hiding under the name iPad, but the face is familiar.
Also, he's also worked as an assessor here in town, and has had thoughts and had to deliberate this issue in the past. So
that's true. Mayor Narkowitz.
He's actually the chair of the Board of Assessors now.
He is the chair of the
well,
board.
there you go.
Yes, he's the chair.
I'm asking if he wants to unmute and share anything with us.
There you go.
Hi.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm really just sort of here as a resource tonight. I mean, Susan and Mark did a wonderful presentation. But in my case, the mayor's correct. I'm the chairman of the Board of Assessors. I'm the one that has to sign the recap sheet when it goes off to the state. Have been involved with the process. And this is probably my 22nd or 23rd consecutive classification hearing, either as an assessor or as a member of the council, because I was an assessor before I came on the council, and now I'm back to being an assessor now that I'm off the council. So I'm kind of here just as a resource if needed to answer questions. I mean, I also support the factor of one, it's an overwhelmingly good decision given the commercial residential split in the city of Northampton, given the unusual stress that's on our small businesses right now. It really is kind of a no-brainer, is the right thing to do, and it has been for a while. But really why I'm here is just to be a resource if anyone has any questions. I mean, I don't think anybody else has been through 23 consecutive Northampton classification hearings. So that's kind of why I'm here, just to support the Mark in the assessor's office and Susan in the finance office and ask any questions people may have. So if you need me, by all means, wake me up, but that's why I'm here.
Thank you. It's good to see you. Thanks for
Good.
being.
I'm putting on my winter coat here. I got to grow. Councilor Dwight and I only have my beard in the winter, but it's good to see he still has his beard, and see Mary Ann is in the inner bunker out there on West Hampton Road.
That's right, but I don't.
How
have
are you,
a
Mary
beard.
Ann? Good to see you.
See you, David.
Councilor Dwight, 1 second. Councilor Nash, you had your hand up before.
Yeah, I just want to briefly clarify. So in terms of using that override levy, and I guess this question's for Susan. So we didn't use that capacity last year, but we are using it this year.
We didn't have it last year. The override passed in March, but our budget was already set for 2020. So the override that was passed in March was always going to be just to increase the levy for 2021. So we are basically leaving that unused for a year. And then hopefully for the FY 2022 budget, we can get back on track with the fiscal stability plan that the mayor proposed to the voters back when we were talking about the override and the fiscal stability, 5-year fiscal stability plan. So we will be
We're setting the rate for this year's budget.
Right, we're taking a pause this year, and then the fiscal stability plan will go back into effect in 2021 and 2022 when we build that budget.
Thank you.
Councilor Dwight?
It's actually a question for Mark or Chairman Murphy about, it's more about what we have to look forward to or not. I understand that valuations have increased precipitously in the last year. At least that's the scuttlebutt, and of course, that wouldn't necessarily affect our deliberations on this discussion, this tax factor. I mean, on this discussing this tax levy, but anticipating next year, the assessments I would imagine would be reflected in the new valuations or the hot market, as it were. Am I wrong?
You're correct.
So Chairman Murphy is somewhere around 17% correct? Is that something that?
Well, one of the things you'll see, the residential real estate market has been really booming this year. The commercial market hasn't been, because a lot of people are closed. I mean, it's really hard to borrow commercial money right now because a lot of commercial ventures are in fact closed or restricted or reduced hours. So the residential market is going strong. The commercial market, not so much. And the commercial properties are valued based on their net operating income. So if we start seeing vacancies, which we undoubtedly will, commercial values could actually go in the other direction, while residential is still going up. Because what you're seeing is a lot of people relocating from large metro areas to more rural places like here. The competition has driven up the value of the residential properties. Now, it doesn't affect this year because the value we're using for 2021 was January 1, 2020. Before COVID, before any of this happened. So the values we're using now are from January 1, 2020.
Right.
When we use 2021 coming up, that could be a horse of a different color. Residential will be higher. Commercial, it's yet to say, because that math won't get done till sometime in next year in 21. But the residential market moving very strongly. The commercial market very tenuous, and once we take a picture January 1st, we'll see what's happening with that. But that's what's going on the ground.
That's why I figured the COVID flight to smaller residentially oriented towns and cities would result in a boom, and it seems to have. And that of course our decision today about the split rate actually would have a real deleterious impact should we split the rate and we find the commercial value is being driven down while residentials rise, and the toothpaste, once it's out of that tube, we can't get it back in, as everyone's commented on, presents even greater challenges. But so thanks for the perspective. I appreciate that.
Okay. I'm sorry that Mr. Waterman has not reappeared. Anyone else want to speak during the hearing? So we're going to vote on this in finance, and then we're going to vote on it in council, just so the council knows.
Move to close public hearing, please.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Labarge to close the public hearing. Any discussion on closing? Roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Counselor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay, this public hearing has been closed. Next, we had another public hearing, but it has been canceled and the application withdrawn, so we will not do that.
Oh,
What's that?
I said, oh, poo.
Oh, I'm so glad I asked you to repeat that.
What? I thought my mic was closed. I'm sorry. Hot mic.
Bummer.
Next people I'll watch that mic. Okay, moving on to updates. I have a little update at our next meeting, which is December 3rd. I've asked Mayor Narkowitz if he and our public health director, Meredith O'Leary, would come and give us a COVID-19 update to the council and to the entire city, really. As you know, we're watching the numbers grow statewide, countrywide, worldwide. And so they're going to update us on Northampton's situation and on our preparedness for this winter surge. And I'll just, as I'm announcing this, just take a moment to urge people to be safe leading into this holiday next week, and please limit your groups and keep your family and our community safe. So that is my announcement. Any committee chair announcements? Councilor Nash.
Yes, I am here to report that Community Resources is delivering the plastic reduction and sustainability ordinance back to council with a positive recommendation. The members did suggest changes to help improve it to the sponsors and the folks drafting it. But we've done our part, positive recommendation, and it's ready to move on to legislative matters, I guess, pending the report from the Disability Commission, which I think is on the way. So anyway, thank you.
For all that work. And it was a great forum that you had this week, I thought. Other chairs? How about 1 minute announcements? Councilor, ooh, wow. Okay, Councilor Quinlan, then Councilor Labarge, then Councilor Maori, then Councilor Jarrett. You're muted, Councilor Quinlan. Oh, no, there you are. Sorry.
I just wanted to report in on what's happening with the Northampton Policing Review Commission. This past week, an administrative assistant was hired. They started last week. Much thanks to Laura Krutzler and Annie Lesko from the mayor's office for their support in getting the ball rolling and getting us started. But now we have an admin, and the communication has been flowing really well already, I think. We are having the first of our public hearings on Tuesday, December 1st at 6:30 on Zoom, of course, remotely. There will be presentations made by each subcommittee about their progress. The topics for public testimony are to be determined. They'll be determined at our next meeting, which is this coming Tuesday. And then last but not least, a thank you to our council president and to the mayor for the approval to hire UMass Translation Services to guide that hearing to provide interpretation and translation for folks who require help with that. So thanks very much for that. And I don't know if Councilor Jarrett has anything to add to that, as he's also a member of the NPRC, but I kind of got my hand up first.
Okay, I just want to quickly also echo that thanks to Laura and to Annie for helping out with the Policing Review Commission since they started, and providing support to the meetings and doing all of those minutes, which is no small task. We got a little glimpse at Laura's notes. That's an intense thing to take those minutes. So huge thanks to them for really stepping up and doing that extra work. I'm very, very, very appreciative. I've already forgot my order. I think it was Councilor Labarge, then Maori, and then Jarrett. Okay.
Thank you, Councilor. I want to thank all my residents in Ward 6, all the residents here in the city of Northampton, our mayor, the mayor's office, all the city councilors, and all the department heads, employees in this city to have a happy, happy Thanksgiving. And please be safe and stay healthy.
Thank you, indeed. Councilor Maori.
Yeah, I just wanted to remind anyone who might be watching that the Yule Days is off and running downtown for Thursday through Sunday. There's generous discounts and cheerful merchandise. It's a great way to socially distance and also support our local businesses. This year you don't need a bag, so pretty straightforward, and the weather looks really pleasant. So I hope that we'll all be going downtown.
Indeed, shop away. Councilor Jarrett.
Councilor Quinlan actually covered everything I was going to report on, so thank you, Councilor Quinlan.
Okay. Any other announcements? Anyone I missed? Councilor Labarge?
Yes, I just want to say, former Councilor David Murphy, it's really nice seeing you here today, and hopefully we'll see you more. Thank you.
Indeed, and I can't believe you never told me you have a cat. This is very exciting for me to see that cat.
I know.
We've talked about dogs a lot, but I can't believe you held out on the cat. Okay, Mayor, unless you have any communications. Oh, you do, okay.
Just to add to what Councilor Maori said, was just to remind people that parking is also free during those Yule days, because the council held a special meeting recently to do that. So yes, come downtown, wear your mask, and enjoy the free parking while you're supporting local businesses.
Indeed. Okay. Moving to the consent agenda. I'm going to read the title of the items. There are only a couple of them, and then ask for removals for discussion, because there's no discussion on the consent agenda. We have the minutes of October 15th, 2020, and we have 20.150, a secondhand dealer license application for Retro Genie. This is a renewal application. Retro Genie is at 11C Bridge Street. The applicant is Jean F. Mulvey. That is the consent agenda. Any removal?
Move to approve.
Motion's been made by Councilor Dwight and seconded by Councilor Labarge for approving the consent agenda. Roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
and Councilor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, the consent agenda is approved. We are now going to recess for finance. Laura, will you please call the roll?
Councilor Labarge,
Here.
Councilor Quinlan,
Here.
Councilor Shara,
Here.
and Councilor Thorpe.
Here.
Okay, first up is approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, which was October 15th, 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Any discussion on those minutes? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, those are approved. And our only item on for today is 20.151, in order to establish a tax classification for FY 2021. Order that the Northampton City Council approves a residential factor of 1 for fiscal year 2021. Is there a motion? This is upon the recommendation of Mayor David J. Narcoitz. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
That was Councilor Thorpe
Thorpe.
and seconded by Councilor Labarge. Okay, so discussion. This is what we just had the presentation on. Councilor Quinlan.
Just wondering at the bottom there, it says 17.41. Why is that there?
I'll
And
change
is it?
that.
It should be 1737. Is that where the?
It should be the
rate
number
goes?
of the current order, which is 20 something.
Yeah, 20.151.
Okay.
It's a
Oh,
footer.
okay. Okay.
I'll
I
change
understand.
it.
I understand. Okay.
Councilor Dwight.
When I first came on, actually, when I very first came on, the discussion of splitting the rate came up, and principally because the appeal is residents wanted to see their their taxes go down and have a greater burden borne by commercial properties in Northampton. And to be perfectly honest, I thought that was a good idea. I was disabused of that thought pretty quickly as someone reminded me, and I bring this up every year, and it's unfortunate, my hometown of Holyoke. If you'll notice on that graph, there's two distinctive communities in this valley, Longmeadow and Holyoke, both whose fortunes are diametrically opposed. Holyoke has, I believe, still has the highest commercial tax rate in the state. And Longmeadow has the highest residential rate in the state, or at least that used to be so. I think when I last checked last year. Holyoke, back in the day when I was growing up, it was on the wane, but at the same time, Holyoke was an industrial power system. They were all mills, and they provided all the jobs, and we used to look down our noses at little cow towns like Northampton and the like. And the one thing that Northampton has proven is its resiliency as we change and adapt, as the economy changes and adapts. The way we actually function is as a community. Northampton always had the flexibility of diverse resources, and had a single tax factor, factor of 1. I'm sorry. Holyoke did not, and when things were going great in the factories, Holyoke residents enjoyed a relatively low tax rate, while at the same time enjoying the benefits of a good revenue stream. But when those enterprises moved out or closed, they were stuck, as you've heard, with the dilemma, a political dilemma it is, because it would require someone to run for office on the platform of "I will raise your taxes," which, as we all know, is not necessarily the best way to approach these things. So consequently, you haven't seen any councilors run on that platform in Holyoke, and you're not likely to. The same is true in communities like Lowell and Lawrence, other former industrial centers that used to define the economy of the state, no longer. We're now in another flux situation. The economy is in a seismic shift. It was moving that way, particularly the retail economy and the commercial economy is certainly moving that way before COVID, but COVID has really kind of exacerbated it and sped up the whole process exponentially. Online sales, particularly for retail, were problematic for small bricks and mortar locally owned stores. And as Mark had pointed out, most of those stores don't own their properties that they're in. They're renters. any assessed commercial valuation that would go to their landlords obviously would be passed on down to them, thus creating an even larger burden on already strained system. Insofar as Northampton, our viability is actually in this interesting way, and this rather quiet way that no one really pays attention to, is largely due to the fact that we've maintained this parity. And we have had and mind you, I bring this up in the absence of a debate because I haven't heard a debate about this yet. But in years past, I think every year that I've sat on the council, and I suspect that's true of Council Labarge, who's senior to me there, and I certainly for Council Murphy, every year the discussion comes up. And that's why I just wanted to share my personal process of why I came to see the value, no pun intended, of a factor of 1. And mind you, also, as I said, Longmeadow, all residential properties with very high valuations and also very high tax rate. And Northampton, if you look in that graph, our tax rate is the lowest out of those comparable communities. And I want to stress that if you go by social media, Northampton is more expensive than anywhere else. It is simply not so. And but at the same time, I do acknowledge, not only acknowledge, but stress out the fact that what I was brought up before was the increased demand on housing and on all properties other than commercial in the community have created, of course, an affordability issue that seems almost insurmountable, and it's really distressing, and it actually creates some of our biggest woes that we discuss in every other aspect on the council about almost every resolution and every order that we discuss. This actually plays into that. And that is something that I know that we are all devoted to trying to see what we can within the limited means that are allowed by state and federal law to do what we can to correct. And actually the mayor and Susan and we, fair enough, have done laudably. But I will continue to support the factor of 1. And that's my reasoning.
For sharing that perspective. Councillor Nash, then Councillor Labarge, and Councillor Jarrett.
Yeah, first I want to thank Councillor Dwight for his annual factor of 1 speech, and I've appreciated it every year on council. It really helps frame our discussion. That I'm going to be supporting the factor of 1. It came up the other day while I was canvassing for the plastic reduction ordinance with businesses downtown. I had a very lively discussion with one property owner, business owner, and the request for it was for tax relief from the city, some sort of tax relief. And I was like, hold it, you have the lowest commercial rate in the valley thanks to the factor of 1 that we have. And that as we're talking about it, I'm like, hold it, I'm paying the same rate that you are on my home that you are on your business. And that right now, one of the ways that while our commercial sector is really struggling right now is by maintaining this factor of 1. That this is a way for us to support our business community right now. And that it's one of those baseline ways that we are supporting them, other than, doing our Yule Day shopping and things like that. This is one of those foundation business things that people look at when they're starting a business, when they're investing in Northampton, and so I'm going to be supporting this, and it's actually very It's very important for our business community, especially right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Labarge.
Thank you. Our Councilor Dwight, I think he said quite a bit, and he was absolutely correct. We did have on council at one point where it was brought up about the split, and we listened, and it was not supportive. And I'm supporting and staying the way I have been with the factor one. Like I stated before, we need to look at our city, we need to look at our businesses, we need to look at commercial. Right now, things are not good out there. And it's our job as city councilors to make it to the best that we can so that they can survive and not adding on higher amounts of rates for any businesses in this city. So I'm going to support this, and hopefully it will pass 2 readings tonight.
Thank you. Councilor Jarrett.
Thank you. I wanted to note that the tax rate on its own doesn't mean much. It's only when you multiply it by the actual values that it gives the real burden. Next year with the potential for rapidly rising residential values, well, maybe we will need to consider a different factor. But this year, I don't see a good argument for a different factor. I kind of want to express the frustration, though, that I have with the limits that the state has given us. Like, none of the exemptions are really appropriate for us. If, for example, if there could be some that could be appropriate, like if we could take income into account, we could have a progressive tax rate for our property tax, or if the residential exemption could take renters into account so that the landlords would not have to pay the higher tax rate for those renters who lived at their primary residence, then we could shift the burden onto those with second homes. But none of those are our options. We only have very limited options. This is what we have to go with for now. And it could be worth discussing state level legislation, supporting the changes there for the future.
Thank you. Councilor Dwight.
I quite agree with Councilor Jarrett, except on one point. I don't think property tax by its very nature is progressive. It is a regressive taxation system and structure. And the state, this has been my other bugaboo. My annual plea is to establish a progressive income tax and do that appropriately and shift the burden from property taxes and small communities trying to support things that used to be supported through income taxes that were collected in the state that were at least more just than they are now. The burden fall and we see the consequences of it. A community with a depressed economy has substandard school systems and not a lot of hopeful options, largely due to the fact that the state has decided to abdicate its responsibility from collecting fair and progressive taxes and leaving it up to the communities to essentially create a regressive system that particularly affects people on fixed incomes. And you're right. I mean, I think adjusting it with exemptions would be great. I think adjusting it and fixing it good and proper would be better. And I quite agree with you.
Councilor Jarrett.
Maybe I wasn't clear about my point. I think we're in agreement, Councilor Dwight. I was saying that if we could take income into account, so for example, if those with higher incomes could pay a higher property tax, that's a way of sort of a backdoor way of getting a progressive. I'd rather have a progressive income tax, for sure.
Councilor Maori.
I just wanted to acknowledge that for anyone watching, that we all know it's an imperfect year and that there's a lot of anxiety and everyone is feeling the pinch, commercial and residential, and take a moment to commend the mayor for thoughtfully and effectively delaying the override during this time.
Thank you. Other thoughts or comments? Okay. Seeing none. Laura, let's have a roll call and a positive recommendation.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, that moves forward to the council with a positive recommendation from the Finance Committee. And there is no other business. So
Move to adjourn.
Second.
motion's been made by Counselor Quinlan, seconded by Counselor Labarge to adjourn. Roll call please on adjourning, Laura.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned out of finance and back into the full council. I feel like the pressure's off. It's, you know, I have the former chair of finance for many, many years on this meeting right now. So thankfully it was an easy finance agenda and I didn't.
And he was an excellent one too.
He was an excellent one. So I was feeling the pressure. Okay, we're back in council and we're picking up these financial orders. And once again, we're at 20.151 in order to establish a tax classification for FY 2021. This is motion's been made by Councilor Barge, seconded by Councilor Thorpe, was it?
Yes.
So this is the first reading. As we know, 2 readings have been requested. Is there discussion on first reading? Everybody discussed out from this? Okay. Roll call, please, Laura, on first reading.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in first reading. And so just to clarify, anyone who's watching, so this was the order that we just gave a positive. My children are coming in, you might hear them. This was the order upon the recommendation of the mayor, which was to approve a residential factor of 1. So we have just taken a first reading on approving that factor of 1. And
Sorry.
yeah, move to
suspend the rule.
Second.
Motion is made by Counselor Murray, seconded by Counselor Foster to suspend rules. Counselor Jarrett, discussion on suspension of rules.
Yes. I know in the past years, this was done in 2 readings, and I wondered, was this a delay because of the COVID delay and the budgeting information that we didn't get this until now?
Susan, I think, addressed this, but I'm going to ask her again if she's here, or the mayor.
The reason that we're asking for the 2 readings tonight because we normally do this in October, but we were unable to do it in October because we were still waiting for the state budget. And then DOR said, well, we still don't have a state budget. People can't, towns can't wait forever. So we're going to let you set it on a estimated budget. So it was related to the state budget and COVID. We were ready. We actually had our values approved in October. So we normally would have done it then. I do want to say too, that if you do take the 2 votes tonight, there is a form that I'll be forwarding to Laura that actually physically has to be signed by a majority of the council members. So Laura will need to do whatever she does, meet you in the parking lot or however we're doing things these days, and get a majority of you to actually sign it. And then we have to upload that in the portal along with our tax rate. Now, I'm planning to submit everything tomorrow, should you vote twice tonight. But if the signatures can't be obtained till Monday, that's fine. I can send those in later.
Thank you for that explanation.
So, Councilor Barge, this is a discussion on suspending rules.
I was gonna ask Susan in regards, she said that she would have them ready tomorrow. What time would they be ready tomorrow, Susan, for us to sign?
The form is going to get sent to Laura right now. Like I just waiting to do it because I have to do it when you actually after your hearing because it's dates and time stamped. So Laura will have it in her hand shortly.
Thank you.
I'll be there by 8:30 or earlier if someone needs to sign earlier.
Excellent. Okay, any other discussion on suspension of rules? Roll call on suspending rules, please.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
and Councilor Labarge.
Yes. Move
Okay.
to approve.
Second.
Second.
Motion on second reading has been made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Thorpe. Discussion on second reading. Seeing none, roll call please, Laura.
Councilor Nash,
Yes.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
and Councilor Maori.
Yes.
Okay, we have in two readings approved the residential factor of 1 tax classification for FY 2021. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good to see you, Mr. Murphy. Good to see you, Susan, and Mark as well. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, next up, we have financial orders on second reading. If you remember from the last reading, we had a whole bunch on first reading, which means we have a whole bunch on second reading. So first up, we have 20.135 in order to declare surplus and authorize sale of 593 Elm Street.
I'm recusing myself. I'm not.
Second it.
Sorry, Councilor Thorpe is recused. So I need a motion.
Move approval. Move approval, please.
Second it.
Motion's been made by Councilor Dwight, seconded by Councilor Labarge. Any discussion on second reading? Councilor Jarrett.
Thanks. I confirmed that the apartment in the building is no longer, that the Children's Advocacy Center uses the whole building. And definitely in favor of this, but at some point would like to have a larger conversation about how we surplus city buildings, given the urgent need for affordable housing. So it's just hard to vote to surplus property that was recently housing. And so would love to be looking into the economic feasibility of converting surplus city buildings to affordable housing. I know they're not often set up in that way at all, but so just a note there. Thanks.
Thank you for that note. Other discussion on second reading? Roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Quinlan,
Yes.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Councilor Jarrett,
Yes.
Councilor Labarge,
Yes.
Councilor Maori,
Yes.
and Councilor Nash.
Yes.
Okay, that is approved on second reading. Next, we are at 20.136 in order to make changes to the FY 2021 general fund budget to balance the FY 2021 budget.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's made by Councilor Labarge, seconded by Councilor Dwight. Councilor Thorpe, you can join us again. And any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Councilor Shara,
Yes.
Councilor Thorpe,
Yes.
Councilor Dwight,
Yes.
Councilor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
and Counselor Quinlan.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading. 20.137, in order to rescind and replace FY 2021 Water Enterprise Fund budget.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Labarge, seconded by Counselor Thorpe. Discussion on second reading. Roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
and Counselor Shara.
Yes. Next, that passes in second reading. Next is 20.138, in order to rescind and replace FY 2021 Sewer Enterprise Fund budget.
Move approval, please.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Labarge. Discussion on second reading. Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Did I skip Counselor Jarrett?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Counselor Nash,
Yes.
and I think Counselor Maori said yes before I
Yes.
interrupted. Thank you. Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
and Counselor Thorpe.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading. 20.140, in order to surplus land to abutters at Woodland Drive.
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Labarge, seconded by Counselor Thorpe, I believe. Discussion on second reading. Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
and Counselor Dwight.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading. 20.141, in order to accept $10,000 gift from DA Sullivan for Senior Services Technology Lending Program.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Foster, seconded by Counselor Maori. Discussion on second reading. Seeing none, roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading. Next is 20.143, in order to appropriate $3,000 in CPA funds for construction of Pine Grove Trail.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion's been made by Counselor Labarge, seconded by Counselor Thorpe. Discussion. Roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
and Counselor Jarrett.
Yes.
Next, Counselor Foster is going to recuse herself. This is 20.144, in order to appropriate $65,000 in CPA funds for water-based recreation assessment project.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made by Counselor Labarge,
Second.
seconded by Counselor Jarrett. Discussion. Roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
and Counselor Labarge.
Yes.
Okay, that passes in second reading, and Counselor Foster can join us again, and we are moving down to ordinances. This is 20.139, an ordinance to add section 285-31 newspaper boxes. This is on first reading, received a positive recommendation from Legislative Matters, and oh, it's very long.
Move to approve.
Second,
Motion's been made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by
Counselor Labarge.
Counselor Labarge. I'm trying to, okay, I'm going to read it. In the year 2020, upon the recommendation of the mayor and planning sustainability, an ordinance of the city of Northampton providing chapter 285 code of ordinances, city of Northampton, Massachusetts, to be amended by adding section 285-31 newspaper boxes of said code to encourage the availability of publications consistent with public safety and public use of sidewalks and public space. Section 285-31 newspaper boxes. A, the purpose of this ordinance, the purposes of this ordinance are: 1, to prevent the unlimited proliferation of private news racks that cause visual clutter, reduce pedestrian safety, and negatively impact city aesthetics. 2, to replace individual private news racks with publicly owned multi-rack newsstands that provide available space for all types of publications. 3, to promote the public health, safety, and welfare and the aesthetic qualities of the city by controlling the placement, size, construction, and appearance of news racks. Definitions. 1, newspaper box shall mean a container used for dispensing of publications to the public at a fee or no charge. 2, broadsheet, the broadest newspaper format characterized by long vertical pages, typically 22.5 inches, typically stored in a newspaper box with a fee collecting mechanism. 3, tabloid, a newspaper having pages half the size or smaller of those of a broadsheet newspaper. C, use regulations. Privately owned newspaper boxes may not be placed on city sidewalks or on any public property. 2, the city provides public newspaper boxes with spaces available for lease for both broadsheet and tabloid publications on a space available basis. D, use of public newspaper boxes. Publishers, 1, shall apply to the Northampton Building Department for a box space in a city-owned newspaper box on the form prescribed by the building department, including preferences for newspaper box locations. 2, the building department shall annually allocate space at public newspaper box locations using the following. A, first, renewing requests for existing permittees in good standing for the existing space, or for the first year permitted private boxes on the public way. B, then on a first come, first served basis based upon the date of receipt of the completed application. C, if applications received simultaneously exceed available boxes, a lottery drawing to determine allocation of available remaining public newspaper box spaces. D, public newspaper box spaces become available during the year, the building department may allocate them to applicants using the same procedure as their annual allocation. 3, registration and fees shall be due and payable on an annual basis upon the building department's annual allocation of newspaper box space. A, publications shall pay an additional annual registration fee to the city based on a fee per box for tabloid publications, smaller box size, and a fee for broadsheet publications, larger size boxes with fee collecting. B, the mayor shall annually set the application, annual registration, and if applicable, box retrieval fees for private boxes removed from the street. E, the city shall install public newspaper boxes in downtown Northampton and Florence Center, subject to exact location and relocations approved by the Department of Public Works. F, once public newspaper boxes have been installed, publishers will be notified to occupy the new boxes and to remove all freestanding news racks within 30 days of the notification. Laura, you're sharing your screen.
I apologize.
Freestanding racks are not allowed to coexist on sidewalks with public newspaper boxes. Private newspaper boxes not removed within 30 days of notification shall be removed by the building department. The city is under no obligation to store private boxes under their removal, after their removal. If the city does store any private boxes,
Thing again.
any box retrieval shall require the payment of a box retrieval administrative fee. G, newspaper box licensees shall be responsible for the maintenance of their door operation, fee collection box if applicable, and the inside of their newspaper box space. Newspaper boxes shall not be used for or contain advertising logos or for publicity purposes other than that associated with the dispensing of the publication contained in the box. Public newspaper boxes shall be kept in a reasonably clean, neat, and rust-free condition, with at least 90% of the surface area free of graffiti and weekly cleaned to remove all litter inside, under, and around the box. H, newspaper box permit holders shall hold the city of Northampton harmless from all claims for damage whatsoever arising from the use of public newspaper boxes and provide a certificate of insurance documenting workers' compensation coverage and 10,000 to 100,000 of property damage in the city, with the city named as an additional insured. I, public newspaper boxes not used and or not maintained for 30 consecutive days, not used for the publication shown on the registration form, or for which no annual fee is paid, will be considered abandoned. The building department shall rescind the public newspaper box space permit and reallocate the space with 7 days written or email notice to the address shown on the newspaper box registration.
Yay. We did it.
Did it. I think it's already on the floor. So Councilor Dwight?
Move to approve.
Do you want me to give a brief synopsis? I don't know if is Director Fiden here or?
Director Fiden is here.
Okay, well, he'll do it better than I will, so I will step aside.
Okay, I'll try to be very brief. So just in terms of quick context, those who've been council for a while remember, I think it was 3 years ago that the mayor's request, you allocated funds for a wayfinding program. We created a wayfinding committee that met for about a year process. And we created a 4-step process for downtown wayfinder, or downtown in Florence. One is sort of just refreshing all the parking signs downtown, just the metal signs. And we completed that about a year ago. The second is putting up the 3 intelligent parking signs that say how many empty spaces there are in the garage. We did Pleasant Street earlier this fall, and we did 2 signs this summer as part of the shared street project. The third component is creating a wayfinding signage, basically, bright, intelligent information signage, and we're working on that with the vendor. So we hope to be moving forward in that. And the final one was replacing the proliferation of newspaper boxes that sort of grow wildly and fall over and block wheelchair accessible ramps with centralized, the jargon in my field is newspaper box condos. They're not really condos, but the city would own attractive metal centralized boxes instead of having newspapers pay a fee to the city for their own boxes. They would pay for a fee to the city for using the city's boxes. There's one example of those right now that we weren't involved with, but Smith College put up one of the, there's not that many vendors that make this. Smith College has one of these at the John M. Green Hall PVTA bus stop, just to the left of the stop. So imagine that kind of box downtown. And so it becomes a lot more attractive. We can accommodate however many papers are out there. This process took a while because there are First Amendment free speech rights. And so we had to work closely with city solicitor to make sure that we were doing nothing that was in violation of those rights. We don't pick favorites, right? So the Gazette's a newspaper of general record, an advertising weekly is not, but we treat them all the same. We've been working on this for a while. There's a unique opportunity right now, which is most of the newspaper boxes are empty right now. So it's easy to do this transition. So we worked already, for example, with the UMass paper, and they took out their 3 newspaper boxes on their own. They're not using them anymore. So, it's a pretty easy time for a transition, but we'd like to move forward. It's a good time for pricing to buy these boxes. So before we can actually buy boxes and install them, we need to make sure that it's okay for city council to require people to use our boxes. Otherwise, it wouldn't do any good.
Thank you. Questions, comments? Councilor Foster, then Councilor Marsh.
Thank you, Director Fiden. When I first saw this come up on the agenda a couple weeks ago, I was really concerned about some of the free speech issues that you had mentioned. And so I watched the recording from the Legislative Matters meeting. Most of my questions were answered, and I understand where you're going with this. I appreciate that. I just had, I guess, 2 sort of piggybacked additional questions with it. One is how many, so I understand that right now there's empty space and there's fewer publications than usual, but if we go back to say February, how many publications were typically using private boxes on the street? And then how much space would be in the, is it newspaper condo? Am I using that term correctly? Okay, I just love it. So how many spaces are available in the newspaper condos?
Can I see if anybody has questions while I search through my files? I have all that, but I didn't have it in front of me. So I just need to pull up my spreadsheet. That's why it looks like I'm looking through the ceiling because I'm looking at my other screen. Oh, here it is, sorry. So we looked at all the, I mean, one of the problems with the boxes is they've sort of popped up at random locations. So one of the things we looked at is some centralizing in places where people won't trip over it. For example, by the Academy of Music Pulaski Park bus shelter, there's only 2 plastic boxes. That's a good place for a rack of metal boxes. You're already blocked, it's over there. So the plan is to have fewer locations. So there'd be greater gap, but nobody would ever be more than 250 feet away. But there were originally 68, so we're including Florence as well. We're looking at, so there were originally 68 newspaper boxes. Many were empty even during the prime time. The Daily Collegian has underused their boxes for a long time. Many advertise, so there's 68 slots, but not all full. We're proposing 48 slots, but we could definitely accommodate every publication. And we, in our due diligence, this is now a year and a half old, but we talked to both the Gazette, which of course means the Advocate, and the Republican, and they had no objection. They looked at the spacing. We didn't talk to each of the weeklies, but we think we can accommodate them, and we could do more. I mean, if it turned out that there's greater demand, we could always add additional boxes later in the process.
Thank you. That was going to be my follow-up, is what would be the process if we found that there wasn't enough space? What would be the process for adding additional space?
Yeah, so just to be clear, when we spread out the spacing, so off this box on both sides of the street, so 250 feet, think of that as a city block. When we spread out the spacing so that there's always a box within 250 feet, you might have to cross the street, or 500 feet in the same box, then we'll be able to accommodate, so that reduces automatically some of the duplication of the publications. With that, our 48 spaces can accommodate every single publication we've had out there, a little bit less locations. If new publications came in, Wall Street Journal suddenly decides they want space outside, then yes, we can absolutely add more boxes. At this point, we have the budget for that. If that happened 5 years from now, then it'll be up to the mayor and a future city council for allocating funds so we could buy more boxes.
Thank you.
Another hand, Councillor Nash, and then Councillor Jarrett.
So I just want to start by saying I miss newsstands over these boxes. I preferred going in places and stacks of newspapers and stuff and leave your change on the counter and run out the door to catch your bus or train or whatever. Anyway, so Wayne, how much do we anticipate would be the annual fee? Approximately.
So it's really going to be up to the mayor. The fees, we were sort of looking at, for the ones that don't require fee mechanism, something similar to what people are paying today for the rent, $50-ish. Whether we charge more for the fee mechanism, which is more expensive, I think is part of the discussion, but we're not looking at, a big fee. We're trying to make sure that, in some ways our costs will be lower. Right now, today it's DPW, the plan is to switch it to building, either does or should be monitoring these boxes. And because they do proliferate and fall over, there actually might be less staff time. We hope there's less staff time going forward than there is now. And so the city would be eating, as it were, the one-time capital costs, but the ongoing costs shouldn't be higher.
Yeah, I just want to say that that over the years, they do just pop up in the strangest places, and they can be in the public right of way. They can impact accessibility for people with disabilities, and that I welcome this equitable. This seems like a very economic way to solve this problem. We're allowing vendors ways to sell their newspapers, but in a way that we have a little bit of control over it, and that yeah, it always bothered me that the boxes seem to take precedence over people in, you know, in downtown in Florence, and that just seemed a little unfair. I've also, I've seen them blocking, you know, people being able to get on buses. So anyway, so I welcome this new approach.
And I should add, Amy Kaling at DNA has been very supportive for exactly the reasons you just stated, that it doesn't help the merchants to have these boxes that fall over and are everywhere.
Right. Thanks.
Councillor Jarrett?
I think some of my questions were answered there, but so am I right? The fees will cover the ongoing costs while the capital funds will be paid by the city.
That's correct.
Okay. And you know, there's the advocate size and the Gazette size. There's also a lot of the little real estate booklets. Those are also considered in here.
Yes, there's going to be extra space in the box. We're basically, the boxes come in two sites. So the broadsheet, which right now is only the Republican, the Gazette, and then the other boxes are basically advocate size, and the smaller ones would just have extra space next to them.
Mm-hmm. And who cleans under and around the box? It wasn't clear to me that the licensees would be doing that.
So we are asking licensees to do that. They have to keep them reasonably clean. That was one of the questions that Legislative Matters asked, is there's reasonably clean a legal standard? And the city solicitor thought it was a clear standard.
Okay, sorry, I was just looking. Public shall be kept and weekly cleaned to remove all litter. Okay, I think I was confused about it because up above it says newspaper box licensees shall be responsible for the maintenance of their door operation, fee collection box if applicable, and the inside of their newspaper box space. And then only later does it say about the graffiti and weekly cleaned. But I guess that's a continuation of the above. It's saying what the newspaper box licensees do.
Correct.
So last question, does the wage theft ordinance apply to these licensees? Is this something that they will need to certify they'll be in compliance with? I know it's like workers' comp and other insurance are, but would that?
I don't know the answer, but it wouldn't be different than it is today, because right now they're licensees and they would become licensees. So if it applies to independent boxes, yes. If it doesn't apply to independent boxes, no. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Quinlan.
I'm just following up on Councillor Jarrett's question there in regards to item G. So the city's buying this, and you just mentioned that it would be kind of handled by building. So when you say that, and if there is a door there that's broken, you know, we're saying here that the licensees are responsible for fixing that, but is being managed by building. Would that be something that the city would fix and would then bill the licensee for the maintenance?
No, I'm sorry. So we would expect the licensee to be doing that work. Building is basically the licensing agent and the enforcing agent. So someone gets a permit from them. If the plastic boxes show up again, they're the ones who enforce it. If somebody calls and says, you know, there's graffiti on a building, might go out and inspect it.
Okay.
So.
All right,
now, as always, these are city-owned, so we don't give up our rights to do that. And clearly, you know, between licensees, that would be ours. And one of the things we've talked about when we have extra boxes out is we can always find, you know, bike path brochures. We want the spaces to be activated, not become collections of trash. So my guess is, because the boxes come in sections, basically you're going to get either 3 or 4 units in a box. And so if we had fewer newspapers, we would fill them in with something, in which case it would be our responsibility to maintain it.
Okay, thank you.
I like the idea of bike trail brochures or city brochures. Councillor Jarrett.
Sorry, I had one more question. You know, is there a list of proposed locations?
There is. Now, again, this is, there's a list generally. The exact location, we have not gone through DPW yet, who has to make sure they don't think it affects street sweepings or anything else. I can email around the list of where we're planning, again, subject to the moving a few feet.
Sure, that would be great. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, let's have a roll call, please, on this first reading.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
and Counselor Maori.
Yes.
Okay, newspaper condos passes in first reading. Bye, Wayne. Thank you. Next up is 20.121, an ordinance to amend section 5.3 to reduce the setback from street lot lines for accessory stables. This is a second reading.
Move to approve.
Motion's been made by Counselor Foster, seconded by Counselor Labarge. Is there any discussion on second reading?
Just to say that I think the stables will make great neighbors.
Oh, boy.
Oh,
You've
you've
been
got to
sitting on that
stop
one
it.
for 2 weeks.
That's twice.
That's just, no shame. No shame.
Okay. Roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Quinlan,
Yes.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
and Counselor Nash.
For Nash?
Yes.
All right, that passes in 2 readings. And that brings us to the end of our agenda.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Sorta.
Made by Counselor Dwight, seconded by Counselor Jarrett to adjourn. No discussion on adjourning. So roll call, please, Laura.
Counselor Shara,
Yes.
Counselor Thorpe,
Yes.
Counselor Dwight,
Yes.
Counselor Foster,
Yes.
Counselor Jarrett,
Yes.
Counselor Labarge,
Yes.
Counselor Maori,
Yes.
Counselor Nash,
Yes.
and Counselor Quinlan.
Yes.
Okay, we are adjourned.